Hey friends, and welcome back to Violin Teacher YouTube channel. In this video we are going to continue our series on the Bériot Violin Method. You can download this through a link in my description. And so the last lesson that Bériot actually marks and numbers is the 5th lesson. That's what we're going to do today. We're not going to do it all, because if you've looked ahead you'll see that the 5th lesson covers just about every scale there is. So that's going to be nice. We're going to cover every one of them. So today let's begin by seeing what Bériot has to say about employment of the fingers during a scale. So that employment word just means using the fingers. So he says, whether you're, I'm going to interpret as I go, okay? Whether you're going up the scale or down the scale, when you use the fingers, how you use them, in other words, where you set them on the string is determined by the scale, and actually by the key, right? How many sharps, where the sharps are on the staff, and so forth. Okay, so when the scale extends over a couple of strings, which it always does, doesn't it, as far as I know, the fingers must abandon their positions successively. So the point is that we have finger memory, don't we, from string to string. And this is a real common problem that I've seen a lot of students facing, is when you play a finger, say low 2, on one string, B flat for example, and then maybe you have on the next string you have F sharp. You naturally want to play low 2 here, because you just played, the last 2 that you played was a B flat or a low 2. So I'm kind of drawing a blank, but I'm sure he's going to give us an example of where this is a problem. And I'm sure as we go through every single scale that we're going to find this. So our fingers remember where they played last, and they want to play the same spot. But our fingers have different spots depending on the key. That's the point he's making. Okay, so let me just finish this comment here. If the notes going up are to be repeated. Now this is another good point. Wow, this is really good. So if the notes going up the scale are the same going down, you're supposed to leave your fingers in place. That's what he's saying. Here's how he says it. If the notes of the ascending scale are to be repeated in the descending scale on one string, the fingers must remain on the string to ensure perfect intonation and also to avoid unnecessary activity. So that is really, really good advice. And if you get nothing else from this video, I want to give you these 2 rules of fingering. He says, but these observations apply only to passages requiring a certain degree of rapidity, as in the following instruction. Okay, illustration. So we're going to do the example that he gives us in just a minute. But these 2 are the 2 rules of fingering. The first rule is to place fingers independently. And that means, for example, if you're playing third finger, if you are required to play a third finger, you place it by itself. You don't put all 3, 1, 2, 3 down. Okay, you might have done that as a very beginner, but don't do it as a 2-week-old beginner. Okay, by then get out of that habit. Independent. Place the fingers independent of one another. And rule number 2 is to leave them down as long as possible. Okay, so let's cover this exercise that he gives us. And I don't see anything except slurs, which I don't know that we really need to do this, but let's play it. So we'll scan the example, and we see that we're on the G, and we're going to go G, 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Second measure, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it looks like he has given us fingerings on each note, and that's very nice. Once again, thank you, Mr. Bériot. On measure 3, notice that we now have 8th notes. How do I know they're 8th notes? Because the notes are connected at the top. And we call say if I had a single note that was an eighth note, it would have a flag. It would be hanging down, but the flags are connected now. So there's a bar connecting these notes. A single bar is an eighth note. No matter how many notes it connects, it's an eighth note. And the last two measures of the first line, you will see, are the same thing. So he didn't put the fingerings in, did he? Notice that. So we go twice as fast as quarter notes because 2 eighth notes goes into 1 quarter note. And if you're confused, don't worry about any of that because you're going to hear me play it and you're going to play it back to me, right? So then let's look at the second line now, and you'll notice if you're, depending on your copy of this, there are 2 bars tying 4 notes together now. It looks like a thick, on my copy, it looks like a big thick bar, but it's really 2 bars connecting it. So these are 16th notes. And notice that there are twice as many notes in each measure now. There are actually 16 notes in a 4/4 bar. And there are actually 8 notes in a 4/4 bar of eighth notes. And there are actually 4 quarter notes in 4/4 time per measure. Think upon that. Okay, so let's play this. We're going to play G, 1, 2, 3, 4. Move a little so you can see my hand. G. Let's do it without a slur. We're leaving fingers down, right? Now go down. Pick them up off. Good. All right. Then the next part begins twice as fast. Again. Now line 2, twice as fast. So now let's try it with the slurs as written. And then I'm going to tell you a great exercise book that you should have that gives you a lot of this kind of exercise. Slurring it. Here we go. Careful control on these quarter notes. Here we go. Double time. Double. Half, note, rest, rest. Good. So did you hold the fingers down? Remember, that was his point. Leave the fingers down as you are going up on the same string. All right, now in the next part, let me just tell you this real quick because I promised to do that. So if you ever heard of Sevcik, and you can see how to spell that right here. Sevcik, and I think I even did a video on this a long, long time ago. Opus 1, Book 1, at the very beginning, the first 4 pages. Each page, and the first 4 lines on each page, on each of those 4 pages, give you exercises just like this. So look for my video. In fact, I'll link it right here if I can find it. It's probably, I wish I could have redo that one. I'll redo it at some point probably, but it explains how to do it. So it's important and a great warm-up, isn't it? A great warm-up. And on Sevcik, he gives you a different finger pattern on each string. So you'll get that kind of exercise. And then the sequence of fingers changes also. So that's really good. Okay, so let's read on. He says, but in playing very long notes, the application of this principle would only result in the useless expenditure of pressure and energy and might possibly cramp the hand. So if we are playing the scale beginning G, A, B, C, D, we are returning to the first finger on A. So in the example, here's what his example is. Let's scan it. He walks up the G string, and we are expected to hold those fingers as we walk up. And the next measure, we are playing 4, 1, 4. At this point, once we have released 4, 3, and 2 to play 1 again, and we're coming back to 4, we don't put all 3 fingers down again. You would have terrible intonation if you did that. And so that's what I just said. Place fingers independently as long as they're not in the way of other fingers, and leave them down as long as possible. Okay, so in this example coming up, we walk up the scale. We'll do it separate bows first. On the G. And then we open the hand to the first finger. We return to the 4. Twice more. Only setting the 4th finger. Alright. Really important. I don't know how many people, self-learners maybe in particular, may be trying to put all 3 fingers down, but what that does is when you're holding 1 and you're placing 2, 3, and 4 at once, it pulls all the fingers closer to 1, and then you have cramping in the hand, just like he said, and poor intonation. So it's really, really important to place the fingers independently. And in this particular example, make sure you're doing that, okay? So we're going to speed this up now. The next part is going to go... Oh, separate bow, sorry. Really good exercise for shaping your hand. And we have left hand exercises that are a lot harder than this one. Check this link right here. Okay, so moving on to the next example. You can do that one with slurs when you feel capable of doing that. Okay, if we are to return to the second finger, it is this finger that must remain on the string. That seems obvious, I hope, to you. The next example will prove that to us. So we'll play on the D. Let's make sure we play F natural on this. So as I'm playing that portion, I'm setting 4th finger only, but I'm holding the 2, and I'm actually holding the 1 as well. Don't have to. What would it be like if I lifted the 2? Really awkward. In fact, I would be lifting, that's 1 extra motion, and setting it again to play it, that's 2 extra motions every time. That would be really inefficient if I was playing something like, the Bach double, right? Or some kind of concerto, and my fingers did that all the time. So leave fingers down as long as they're not in the way, and then place the fingers independently. Now we'll do the next 2 measures a little faster now. So there's just one other thing in that particular exercise so that you're not confused that I want to point out. So it's going to be really tempting when you're doing that exercise and you're placing the 4 to play 3 with it, to place 3 with it. And you don't do that, okay? They do at one point lift off the string together. don't they? So fingers quite often lift at the same time, but they never go down together at the same time. So let's zero in a little closer to that and see where that happens. Now the next note I need to play is second finger. So I have, what fingers are in the way? 4 and 3. So I'm going to lift them off together, play the 2, now play the 4. 3 is not going to play. It's going to get close. So strive to make your 4th finger go by itself. Okay, let's look at the next page. Right there, some great technique. Now there's another example on the A string. Likewise, the 3rd finger. Oh, okay, well that should be easy. A string, walk it up. So I don't need to leave 1 and 2 because only 3 and 4 are at work. Now twice as fast. Oh, he changed that. So let's look at the last 2 measures. All right. So let's just review now what we have covered on this. So what he says, either in ascending, going up, or descending, going down in the scales, the employment of the fingers is regulated by the scales themselves. Now what that means is that where we put the fingers will be dictated by the key that we're in and what scale we're playing. But when the latter, that meaning the scale, when the scale extends over several strings, the fingers must abandon their positions. And that means finger memory isn't going to help. You have to think of each string and the finger pattern for each string within the key. Okay, and prepare to fall upon the next string in the appropriate spot, of course. If the notes of the ascending scale are to be repeated in the descending scale, in other words, on one string, if you're going up and down on the string like we did in the exercises, the fingers have to remain on the string. Okay? If you're going to another string, you'll lift them off. But if you're staying on the string as you go down the scale or the exercise, the fingers must remain on the string to ensure that you have really good intonation and you avoid extra movements. So that's the most efficient way to use the fingers on your violin. But these observations apply only to passages requiring a certain degree of rapidity. Okay, so he's forgiving us this rule if we don't have to play the notes really fast. Well, it's a good thing to do whether you're playing fast or not, because you don't need one technique for playing fast and one for playing slow. You want one technique for all, okay? Good. So the habit would be, as we said, place the fingers down, leave them down if you can. And it says, secondly, in playing very long notes, the application of this principle would only result in the useless expenditure of pressure and energy. So here he is forgiving us the leaving notes down if we're sustaining a very long note, leaving fingers down. If we're sustaining, for example, if we played, for example, and then we had to sustain the 2, I could lift 1 off if I wanted to. And you would if you use vibrato, because vibrato is much easier with just the finger that you're using doing the wiggling. Okay, and if you do have to hold fingers down during a sustained note that you're not actually playing, that can cause your hand to be a little bit more tense and cramped than you want. Now, if after playing the scale beginning G, A, B, C, D, we are returning to the first finger on A, and this is where our example. So you would hold the 1. So if you're going to use that finger again in a minute, you got to hold that down, that finger down. Well, let's move on and see what he has for us. Then we'll save the scales for the next lesson. If you've had fun with Bériot this week, like the video, and I'll see you next time.